Formula One on 5 Live.
Welcome back to Suzuka Circuit here in Japan, where we are gearing up for the third and final practice session as we get ever closer to qualifying and the Japanese Grand Prix itself. It is a sunny day here in Suzuka. Yesterday it was pretty overcast and muggy and incredibly humid. It was almost making us think we were still in Singapore. It's still a little humid today, but blue skies over the track and the fans have been flooding in. We've been queuing to get into the track, such as the popularity of this particular circuit and Grand Prix. It is almost 28 degrees air temperature and the track is a toasty 44 degrees. So it's going to be a hot one out there. The next 60 minutes vital for the teams and drivers to hone their machines for qualifying later on. My name's Rosanna Tennant and I'm down in the paddock and the pit lane for this session. And up in the commentary box we've got our lead commentator Harry Benjamin, NEOM McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird and BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Harry, different day, but I'm guessing it might be same result for this practice session with Max Verstappen on top. He topped both sessions yesterday. Can we expect anything different in the next 60 minutes?
Unlikely. I'm reading what you said after FP1 and FP2 yesterday, and there's a small bit in his quote where he says, it's looking tight. And I just thought, is it really? He was back right on the pace, and it does feel like it is business as usual. Weather, I don't think is going to play any kind of factor at all this weekend in shaking things up. So it's going to be all eyes behind the Red Bulls to see what the fight is.
I love how he's trying to sort of rev everybody up, keep the hype going, even though he's absolutely owning it. Of course, 151 points now between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. Red Bull can take the Constructors' Championship this weekend if they outscore Mercedes by a point, but Max is going to have to wait a little longer for the Drivers' Championship to come his way, although we all know he's got pretty much a hand and a half on the trophy. Sam Bird, this is such a fabulous circuit, such a driver's track, such a racy track, but the temperature's hot and the drivers yesterday complaining about low grip, thermal degradation when it comes to the tyres, so lots for them to sort of iron out in this final session, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely, Rosanna. This is the final chance they get at getting the car sorted pretty much for the entire weekend, and their final chance to get it right before qualifying. This track is very hot at the moment. We're going to see high deg. Sector 3, the tyres are going off, especially on the softs. The softs as well don't seem to be lasting very long in race conditions, so whether they'll be used in the race, we're not sure yet. People sliding around, which causes external tyre temp issues. So a lot to learn in free practice 3.
Definitely. So Max Verstappen leading the way yesterday with Ferrari and McLaren. Just the McLaren really of Lando Norris sort of troubling the top end of the timesheet. So the battle between McLaren and Ferrari definitely the one to watch for two. Mercedes pretty much off the pace, and I was just having a chat to George Russell's race engineer Marcus Dudley, and he said we worked hard into the night making some changes and hoping that will bring them forward. Lewis Hamilton finishing yesterday's session at P14 and George Russell P5. Not as bad as FP1, but it doesn't seem to suit them this track. And then if we look further around the grid, some nice little performances yesterday. Yuki Tsunoda finishing quite high up in FP1, and the big news this morning that we all woke up to, Andrew Benson, was that AlphaTauri have confirmed their lineup for 2024. The gossip, the rumours, it was all sort of kicking off around the circuit over the last couple of days, but it will be Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda in the seats for 2024, and Liam Lawson, who's still got this weekend to do in the cockpit, he'll be the reserve. What do you make of all that?
Well, they've gone for experience, Rosanna. That's the thinking behind that plan. I think there's also probably, I know this is Red Bull, so humanity doesn't normally come into it with them, but it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Lawson's had 4 races while Ricciardo's only had 2 since his comeback, and then he broke his hand in practice at Zandvoort. Ricciardo, it's fair to say, I think he hasn't proved yet that he's back to the old Daniel Ricciardo. So they don't know whether they're getting Red Bull Daniel Ricciardo or McLaren Daniel Ricciardo. That's not going to become apparent until he's done some more races. But they've been making big play of Ricciardo's feedback quality, which obviously Lawson doesn't have, and they are a team trying to develop. And I think Tsunoda isn't the best in that area, so they feel that Ricciardo's a better partner for him. In typical Red Bull style, though, they've kept Lawson as reserve, and he absolutely deserves that because he's been very impressive. Everybody's saying that up and down the pit lane since he stepped in to replace Ricciardo. And that means, of course, if Ricciardo doesn't perform next year, they can always get rid of him and put Lawson in the car instead. So it works quite well for Red Bull on a number of levels, because you've also got Ricciardo putting pressure on Perez in the second Red Bull. So
lots of tentacles to that story, and I'm actually going to pick up on the word impressive, because you use that to describe Liam Lawson's performance over the last few race weekends. Meanwhile, AlphaTauri saying that Ricciardo has impressed them with the 2 outings he had back in Hungary and Belgium, and you sort of think, well, actually Liam's been more impressive, I would say, in that car. Do you agree?
Yeah, was that aimed at me? Sorry.
Do you agree, Harry?
Well, Daniel finished 13th and 16th in those 2 races that he had in the Grand Prix for Belgium, at least. I think, to reiterate what Andrew said, it is the behind-the-scenes work that Daniel can bring that I think they value at the moment higher than anything else. They know what he's done and what he's capable of. His track record speaks for himself. And he was even in Singapore, just working on the engineering side. So clearly they value that input, and they need that input because they are currently plumb last in the Constructors' Championship, and they need that experience to help. But I can see both sides of why they've gone with Yuki and Daniel and not Liam. I wonder if Red Bull might try and plant a Liam Lawson in a Williams seat, if that might become available for next season. But in terms of being impressive, I think it's just the experience and the technical knowledge that Daniel Ricciardo can bring at this stage that has probably impressed them the most.
Yeah, the session has started. We're at 58 minutes and 13 seconds to go. And I was just watching Sergio Perez have a chat with his engineers. Bit of a scrappy one for him yesterday, running wide, further down the order than Max Verstappen, which, okay, you might expect. But can he improve today? Obviously, he needs to improve today, and he needs to start right up the order, because if Red Bull are going to take the Constructors, they're after a bit of a 1-2 finish here, aren't they, surely?
Yeah, for me, Sergio, I think his job is clearly safe. Red Bull are happy with him, but I'd like to see more qualifying performance from him, especially. Okay, in the races he comes back because he's clearly got the fastest car out there, but you look, stemming back from Monaco, you've got 20th on the grid, 11th in Spain, 12th in Canada, 15th in Austria, 15th in Silverstone,
Sam, your
9th in
stats
Hungary.
are off the chart.
Well, thanks to Harry Benjamin.
Yeah,
let's face it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and last time out, 13th in Singapore.
Your recall is astonishing.
Do you want to do all 22 drivers that have taken part in this 2023 season?
But being serious, that's not good enough for somebody that is in the best car on the grid, and your teammate is putting it on the front row or pole every single weekend. So I'd like to see more from Sergio this morning, and then hopefully he can have a better qualifying.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't up there with the likes of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz in the Ferraris and Lando Norris in the McLaren. Drivers starting to get belted in now. A few upgrades being brought this weekend, which comes as a little bit of a surprise, I guess. We're on a double header, flyaways as we call it in Formula One. Difficult to get the parts out here, but quite a few drivers and teams running upgrades, Andrew, yesterday. What did you make of it? Are there some performance jumps coming over this weekend?
Well, I think for Ferrari particularly, it was a relatively encouraging day. They've got a new floor on that car. Charles Leclerc ran it in the first session, and they went on both cars in the second. And they were pretty competitive, not Verstappen level competitive, but they were the best of the rest after him. And also on race pace, it's a slightly cloudy picture. Leclerc was the second quickest on the medium tyre behind Verstappen, but then Verstappen's medium tyre was the test tyre, so it's hard to draw any. That's also supposed to be the same compound and supposed to be better, even though most of the drivers thought it was worse than
yeah,
the current
Pirelli
one.
actually, Pirelli being very honest in their communications yesterday, saying that it didn't give the level of grip that they'd hoped it would. The potential isn't there, so they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, I guess, on that C2 compound that they wanted to bring in for 2024, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's a familiar story with Pirelli. They bring in a new tyre and the drivers normally find it worse than the old one, and they have to go back to square one again. Anyway, despite that, I'm hearing on the grapevine that Pirelli will get the new tyre tender from 2025 onwards, by the way. Just to go back to the upgrades, so that Ferrari upgrade looks positive so far. Red Bull also have a new floor, the one that they had on the car in Singapore and took off in Singapore while they were having that really weak weekend there. Now both cars have got it. So, Perez really needs to up his game. A second off his teammate's not good enough, even if that teammate's Verstappen.
Yes, exactly. I know all the caveats apply, but he does still need to be performing. We have a car on track. It's Carlos Sainz taking the track all by himself. Let's hand it up to the commentary box then. Harry, it's all yours. FP3 has started. We've already got quite a few minutes down on the clock. Why are they taking so long to come out, do you think?
I have absolutely no idea. But it's great that Carlos Sainz is out on track. That's one. He's certainly got it all to himself. Perhaps it's to do with the messaging and the feedback from yesterday's free practice sessions, where they were talking a lot about high degradation and low grip on this circuit, as we've just covered off. But now just letting the first few minutes go by. So for those who do wish to do a sync up, it's 54 minutes and 22, 21 and 20 seconds remaining of this free practice 3 session. The final practice session, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc now in the other Ferrari are both out on track. It's a Ferrari test day that we're all watching now with that new floor.
So what's interesting about the new floor yesterday was what Leclerc said. So 3 races in a row, Sainz has had a tiny edge on Leclerc. Leclerc's obviously not been happy about that, and he's been talking about how he's had to dial understeer into the car because of its inconsistent handling, and he doesn't like understeer. Yesterday, with the new floor, he said, I changed a bit my driving style and went with the car a little bit in my direction too. And he said the floor's about giving them a little bit of consistency. So that's saying, although he's changed his style a bit to try and adapt to the characteristics of the car, he's also been able to take the car back towards what he wants as a result of this new floor. So I think perhaps, Sam, it's not that big a surprise that he then had the usual edge over Sainz.
Yeah, the faster drivers tend to run with a car that's more on edge and a bit more nervous, because understeer is a slower car, effectively, because you can't carry minimum speed with understeer. You need to have the car moving around a bit. But if it's inconsistent, it doesn't give you the confidence to carry that minimum speed, and then you can make more mistakes, which is what we've seen in the past. Hopefully, this new floor will give him a little bit more of that consistency. He can dial the car in how he wants, and then we'll see back to normal Charles Leclerc.
Sam, why do you think there's only 2 Ferraris out there and we are 52 minutes remaining of this session and nobody else is appearing out of the box?
Honestly, I don't know. I was also, to be honest, I was quite surprised that both the Ferraris started on a set of new...
And we have wind phase 3, higher intensity than yesterday, 10 to 15 kph.
Okay, so higher gusts of wind today in comparison to yesterday, but I'm surprised they started on the soft compound tyre at the beginning of FP3, Andrew. Could you tell us why that might be? I thought that they'd start on a medium and then go to soft towards the end.
They do normally do that, and when they're using softs early, you asked me a little bit too early because I was just about to check the tyre allocation, what was left after yesterday. But normally when they start running on softs, it's because they're trying to save as many mediums and hards for the race.
Yes,
there was a split yesterday between teams who were targeting 2 mediums for the race and teams who were targeting 2 hard sets for the race, new sets that is, because this, as Rosanna was saying, it's high degradation this weekend, not just thermal degradation but also condition degradation. And everyone's saying it's looking more like it's almost certainly going to be a 2-stop race rather than the usual 1. So in that case, how many tyres you use and what they are becomes more critical, and it's also more likely to be in those circumstances that you're going to want the harder compound tyres.
So that's why, Harry, it might be that people are sitting in the pit lane simply because you have to do your tyre allocation way before the race weekend. You have to choose how many sets of compound, how many tyres you get. Now, if they've chosen quite a few softs, thinking the softs would work around here, and then they've got here and thought, actually, my gosh, the tyres aren't lasting, then get rid of some of the softs, and then what's the point of then running the tyres that you want to run? So that's why they might be sitting in the pits.
Well, we have got a few more out on the track now. Lance Stroll, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris have joined the party, all on softs, bar Lance Stroll, who's ventured out on the hard compound of tyre. Just 2 lap times, though, from the 2 Ferraris. Leclerc ahead of Sainz, a 1:31.9 and a 1:32.0. So less than a tenth of a second between them. Absolutely nothing. It was a bad day for the bad end of the day for Pierre Gasly in the Alpine in yesterday's free practice 2 session, finding the wall on the exit of Degner 2. Rosanna, you're outside Alpine.
Yes, and everything looking all right. Pierre Gasly sitting in the car looking beautiful, all rebuilt. Still simple enough repair, the team were telling me. Just a new front left corner. Many millions probably, but you know what I mean. The team managing to work up until curfew last night, sort of around 8 o'clock last night, and then they finished it off this morning. So no dramas for Pierre Gasly. He can head out on track, but at the moment choosing to sit in the garage.
So on the tyre front, just to complete that answer to that question you asked me, Sam, it looks like Red Bull are veering towards the medium for the race. They've got two new sets of those left. And everybody else, Mercedes, Alpine, McLaren, Aston Martin, they've all got 2 new sets of hards left. So they're all veering towards the hard. It doesn't actually... I mean, in a normal season where the teams are a bit more evenly matched, that could be an interesting contrast. But of course, Red Bull with Verstappen are so far ahead of everybody else, it probably doesn't matter whether they use the medium or the hard or the soft or 3 stops or whatever. Verstappen's still going to win.
Exactly. That's why we see that Verstappen's got the most mediums of everybody in the field, and it's interesting that people like Bottas, Joe, Stroll having so many sets of soft tyres and left themselves a little bit vulnerable on the medium and hard with only 1 set of each compound.
Well, on that hard compound is Lance Stroll making his way out of Spoon Curve down the back straight at the moment, approaching 1:30R. The fast left-hander Piastri's going fast as well as they try and set their first lap times on the board. It is just Stroll, Piastri and Norris out on track down through the gears for Lance Stroll in that Aston Martin, back in the car after missing the Singapore Grand Prix due to that huge crash in qualifying ahead of the Grand Prix. But Stroll comes across the line on that hard compound tyre, 3rd fastest, a 1:33.6. Piastri and Norris coming through the middle sector at the moment. The 2 Alpines have also joined the fun, so we're slowly but surely getting more cars out on track as Kevin Magnussen in the Haas as well comes out of the pit lane. This is the sound of the McLaren of Oscar Piastri coming into this weekend, signing a contract extension up until the end of 2026, and he goes fastest, a 1:31.891. Well, Max Verstappen did say it's looking tight, and it certainly is looking tight, but really behind the Red Bulls.
Well, yeah, but
behind one Red Bull.
As we see Lando Norris approach the start-finish line, he looks like he's done a cracking lap. Let's see what it is, and it's a 1:31.1, 7/10 clear of everybody else.
Yeah, 7/10 clear. Norris at the top of the timings, ahead of Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, Stroll, the top 5, and the only 5 to set lap times. Ocon, Gasly, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Joe and George Russell has just emerged from the pit lane, and there is some more activity we can see from our beautiful vantage point here in the commentary box. It's one of the best of the season, actually, as we're right at the top of the main grandstand that runs down the main straight opposite the pit lane. We can see the Alfa Romeo and the Aston Martin garage, and it's a fantastic view here in Suzuka because you have the mountainous regions mixed with all the forestry, and the TV cameras don't do this track justice when it comes to the gradient and the undulations, because that is intense. It's massive. Just looking out, even the pit lane is on a slope. Well, you don't pick that up.
We were speaking about how we've run it in the past. Well, I've run it in the past. I don't think you've run it.
I've run it, 10, 15 times.
So just to give you an idea, we were saying, well, the front straight, that's downhill. Radio?
Gear sync, is that expected?
Negative, that is unexpected.
With the gear sync on George Russell's Mercedes, but the start-finish straight, that is very much downhill. But then it seems like every other area on the circuit, you're running uphill. Everywhere, Sector 1 uphill, to the hairpin uphill, from a spoon uphill, down the back straight, little dip, and then uphill. 130R uphill. So it's really...
So that was a tough run.
Sort of defies logic.
It's a driver's favourite, though, this Suzuka International Racing course. 18 turns, 10 to the right, 8 to the left. The only figure of 8 circuit, just over 5.8 kilometres, 3.6 miles, and we'll get 53 laps on it come race day, hopefully, if all goes well. With 45 minutes remaining of free practice 3, Esteban Ocon in the Alpine is on his first quick lap of the day, and he is out there on that soft compound tyre, and this is the sound of that Alpine making its way towards the fast left-hand of 130R. Let's see how much he pushes. Keeps his foot flat, early doors through there before you're straight into the braking zone for the Casio triangle. The right-hander doesn't take too much curb, takes a little bit more on the left, but then comes out, applies his foot onto the throttle. The pit lane entry is to his right, and he crosses the line. It's 5th fastest.
I mean, saying flat out through 130R, it's not even a corner anymore. It used to be a really ballsy corner, and now it's, I mean, they'll do it all day, every day.
There's 2 reasons for that. One is the increased downforce of the cars, which maybe would be making it flat anyway. The other one is that it was actually changed and reprofiled after Alan McNish had a huge accident there in 2002 in the Toyota. Formerly of this parish, Alan McNish, of course. He's sat in that chair that you're in now, Sam, and he's going to be very heavily involved on a management level in the Audi F1 project. He was very lucky not to be badly injured in that accident, and they eased the radius to the corner, so it's actually a misnomer now. It's actually not 130R anymore. It should be called something else.
But even back in 2011, 2012, you saw people like Kamui Kobayashi have a major moment there because it was a more challenging corner. So I completely agree, they have reprofiled it. But nowadays, with the modern Formula One car, even though they are larger cars than when they were V8s or V10s, the downforce effect is so amazing.
That's Lawson on the radio saying his front brakes are on fire. So Lawson is out on the track at the moment. He's coming into the final sector. So we'll see if he darts for the pit lane or not. And I think he's we'll wait to see where he comes across. But it is getting busier and busier on track. So let's see what's happening in the pit lane with Rosanna.
It's quite busy in the pit lane as well. Just watching Lando Norris being pushed back into the McLaren garage. McLaren mechanics working hard there. And then I've been down at Mercedes garage and watched Lewis Hamilton and George Russell leave the pits. And I was a bit confused. I thought, who's that in the cockpit? A totally different helmet design for Lewis Hamilton.
Okay, no concern here, Liam. It's a new set, and we've got new parts of the car as well. With just a bit of smoke from new parts, which will settle.
So that's Lawson's engineer just telling him, don't worry, it's not on fire, it's just a new set that he's using, getting used to that.
And in the background you can hear a pit stop practice there for Esteban Ocon in the Alpine and just outside their garage. But yeah, going back to Lewis Hamilton, sporting a special edition helmet this weekend, and it's all in chrome. It looks absolutely fabulous. I wonder if you've been having a little look at it on social media. Maybe you're also watching the telly whilst listening to us and you've seen it. Love to know what you think of that. And it's been designed by the artist Hajime Sorayama. So bit of a special helmet for Lewis Hamilton. Will it bring him any luck? Will it give him any more performance? I'm not sure. He's been struggling out there over the last 24 hours, but maybe those changes that I spoke about at the beginning of the programme, that the performance engineer and race engineer Marcus Dudley, who works on George's car, was talking about, maybe that'll give them a slight edge today. But it's not the sort of circuit that suits Mercedes. They prefer a layout a bit more like Singapore, as we saw. Pretty confident and competitive a few days ago in Singapore. Less so here in Japan.
Well, Rosanna, Hamilton's having a better day so far than yesterday. He was half a second off Russell yesterday on 1 lap pace, but this morning they've done 1 lap each, and Hamilton's just 100th of a second quicker than Russell. Now, he's not the only driver who's got a special edition helmet this weekend. Fernando Alonso also has one in the Aston Martin. His is white, and it's a samurai theme. And people who know a bit about Fernando Alonso, he's for many years now he's been interested in samurai culture. He identifies with that, and there's actually it's an in-house interview, unfortunately, that Aston Martin have done, and in-house interviews are never the best from an objectivity.
They should have called you, Benson.
And truth sort of level. But It's interesting nonetheless. Do you know, I've never actually asked Fernando about samurai culture. Maybe that's for the next interview we do.
Well, you know, he's got a tattoo down his spine that's basically to do with samurai culture.
Well, there is an excellent in-depth interview with Fernando Alonso from maybe about a month or so ago now that Andrew did, available on the Checkered Flag podcast stream, so you can check that out at your leisure. But times are starting to come in thick and fast now. After a bit of a slow start to this free practice 3 session, Lando Norris still top of the time, half a second between himself and Lewis Hamilton. Norris on a 1:31.1. It's Norris, Hamilton, Russell, Perez and Piastri the top 5. But you're hearing the sound of Max Verstappen approaching left-hander 130R, and it's purple sector 1, purple sector 2, so that means fastest of anybody on the track, and he's a 10th up on Lando Norris as he comes through the Casio triangle. One more corner to go as we see the enormous Ferris wheel that overlooks this Suzuka circuit, and he's 2/10 up. Verstappen fastest, a 1:39.60.
So normal service resumed at the front then. Just on that samurai thing, actually, reading the interview that Aston Martin did with Alonso, it reminded me of something. I don't know whether you've seen the movie Free Solo. It's about a climber called Alex Honnold who free climbs.
Absolutely.
Free solos without ropes.
Crazy.
And he climbed El Capitan. He's the only guy to free solo El Capitan in Yosemite. And he did it in something crazy like just under 4 hours. It's an amazing film. I really recommend it. But in that film, he says this quote. He's interested in the warrior spirit too. He says, it's about being a warrior. It doesn't matter about the cause necessarily. This is your path and you will pursue it with excellence. You face your fear because your goal demands it. That's the warrior spirit. And in the Alonso interview, he says, for the samurai, dying was a privilege, it wasn't a fear. As a racing driver, in any lap, in any moment, in any corner, there's danger. You have to be prepared for anything that may happen. You have to be ready. So similar in the sentiment, and I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I also thought that was really interesting. Right at the end of that interview, as Leclerc goes third fastest, he said, I will not stop soon, to Fernando Alonso. So not that there was any kind of rumblings that he might be moving on, but you do wonder, the oldest driver on the grid, how long has he got left in him? Well, Fernando performing at the rate he has been performing, and an Aston Martin car that has come on leaps and bounds at the start of this season, he probably doesn't want to go anywhere anytime soon.
I don't think he does, but his problem is whether Aston Martin want to keep him, because there's always this question of age, isn't there? He's going to be 43 next year, and it's the end of next season when his contract runs out. So if Aston Martin keep him, they'll be talking about signing someone who's going to be 44 in his first season of his next contract, 45 in the season after that. And for a team, that's potentially quite a leap of faith because it's such an unusual, unprecedented thing to happen. You have to go back to the 50s and Juan Manuel Fangio, who won his world championships, all 5 of them after the age of 40. He was 47 when he retired, Fangio. Of course, now Formula One's much more athletic demand than it was back in the 1950s, even if they had to put it with heat and a lot more danger than they do now. I think Alonso would say he's not seeing any decline in his own capacity, and he would stop the moment that he does. But it's still a leap of faith for Aston Martin to do that, and it's a leap of faith that Alpine, for example, last year were not so comfortable with. And there isn't really anywhere else he can go. So he has to hope that Aston Martin want him to stay with that caveat. And there's also the Honda question. Honda will be joining Aston Martin in 2026. They say they'd be happy for Alonso to carry on, but there's a bit of history there, and they wouldn't let him drive one of their Indy cars a few years ago at the Indy 500. So it's one thing to say in public that they'd be happy for him to stay when they're thinking the guy's over 40, he's probably not going to be around. It's another thing for them to accept it if Aston Martin turn around and say, we do want to keep him because he's still driving at an Alonso level.
And part of that history made right here, the GP2 engine quote in that McLaren Honda with Fernando Alonso's comparisons there not going down well at all. But, I mean, this is a bigger debate, isn't it, Sam? Because, yes, we love seeing Fernando Alonso, we love seeing Lewis Hamilton out there as well, but they are getting into the twilight zones of their Formula One careers.
That's true. In terms of a figure on a piece of paper on a passport, yeah, they're getting older, but they're not getting any slower. You look at Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time world champion, multiple podiums. He sits third in the World Championship. Fernando Alonso sits fourth in a car that we didn't really fancy at the beginning of the year, yet he's had 7 podiums. So you can't argue that age is making them any slower right now. Radio Alpha.
The brakes just feel so strange. I think I just flat spotted them straight away. Keep it right.
So, for me, there's no harm in doing, like they do in football, year-by-year contracts, just rolling year contracts. And when you start to see that year that they're tailing off, okay, then at the end of that year you say thanks, but no more. But they're perfectly capable, I think, those two especially, of carrying on for another 4 or 5 years.
Well, I mentioned it, Sam, I think it was on the train or maybe off air sometime yesterday. There was an interesting article in The Guardian earlier this week about the age that people reach their peak at things. Now, you would think that sport was an environment that you peaked early, right? But this article says there's scientific proof that for ultra runners, you know, people who run like marathons of more than a marathon, 50 or 100 kilometer races, your age peak as an ultra runner is 45 to 49. And it made me wonder, could it be the case that actually the perception that you lose your edge as a racing driver as you go through your 30s is false physically, and that actually what they're losing is a desire and a commitment to succeed, which Alonso still has? I don't know the answer to that question, but the ultra runner thing really made me question it.
Well, I mean, look at our producer Paddy. He's pushing 50 and getting used to ultra running. There's a whole career
ultra
to have
something.
There. Ultra something. So, just
the amount of beef he ate last night.
Oh, it was. To be fair, though, it was wonderful Wagyu beef, wasn't it? Actually, no, it wasn't Wagyu beef, but it was it's a delightful steak. The food in Japan, Haida, that was it. Haida steak. It was. The food here has been absolutely fantastic. Getting slightly off the beat.
Can we? Yeah, let's get back on topic.
But I just want to throw at you.
Okay.
Obviously, yes, Alonso and Hamilton. I'm not saying, oh, come on, move aside. You've had your time. But equally, when you look at Liam Lawson, who is showing great potential, young talent, the future, when does his chance come? And when you're bringing back the likes of Daniel Ricciardo.
The problem with that argument is, with the young driver argument, is you're talking about Hamilton and Alonso here. These are the two of the greatest Formula 1 drivers there's ever been. They're all both top 10. You have to be at that. If they're still performing at that level, you've got to be a hell of a youngster to even be close to them. So why would you give a youngster a chance instead of them?
No, I agree.
There's
totally.
other people in this category right now that I would say.
Well, you look at Ricciardo, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, straight to mind, who've all been away, come back.
These names are coming out of your mouth. I'm not naming any names. I don't want to get.
I'm not saying they're past it and they're back and they've run out of talent. But there comes a stage at some point where we have a huge amount of young talent. When Formula 2 champions aren't getting a Formula 1 shot, to me that just doesn't sit right.
But why should it be against Alonso or Hamilton that they replace? It should be someone else who's not that good, right?
Well, yes, but that's what I'm saying. But the level is so high anyway, especially in modern day Formula 1.
But that's the point. Just because you win the Formula 2 championship, you're not necessarily good enough to be an elite Formula 1 driver. A number of Formula 2 champions have proven that.
But you should still get the chance.
Yeah, but not at what I'm saying is not at the expense of someone as good as Hamilton and Alonso. Sam, what were you going to say?
Basically, something very similar. Basically.
I just think Sam Bird should have got his chance in Mercedes.
Well, I didn't even win the GP2 championship, so what chance did I have? I only came a second. Terrible. Well, no, what I wanted to say was, guys, right, I think, now you said 10 minutes ago, Benny, when Max Verstappen put it, P1, normal service resumed. Absolutely, yes, he's back to P1. However, Lando Norris's time was done 10 minutes, 12 minutes earlier on in the session, and it's only 2/10 off. Max Verstappen looked like he had a different approach to that lap than what he did yesterday. Yesterday, he absolutely crucified everybody in Sector 1 and didn't have much tyre left in Sector 3. It looked like he took a gentler approach in 1 and then went purple in Sector 3. So has he taken the approach last night of thinking, well, in order for the tyre to last through the lap, I need to calm down Sector 1, so I've got the tyre temp and the energy left in the tyre for 3, but in doing so, Lando Norris is now closer to him?
It's an interesting question because yesterday he was blistering in Sector 1. He was 0.6 quicker than anybody else. But then, interestingly, basically no one else made up any time on him over the rest of the lap, but Charles Leclerc did. He made up 0.3 on the Red Bull over the next 2 sectors. And it might be that that approach through Sector 1 isn't one that's going to be sustainable in a race particularly. Might work over a qualifying lap, we don't know. But maybe they've had to change the setup a little bit to adapt because of that.
Well, I definitely think that he's just taken a little bit out of Sector 1 in terms of the driving to make sure the tyre's still there later on in the lap. I think that's what himself and Red Bull have been working on overnight and into FP3. But Lando Norris, again, great performance in the McLaren. I was expecting.
No?
Well, how could it not be positive?
No,
the McLaren.
Max identified Lando and McLaren as ones to watch coming into
the other question to ask about yesterday is we don't know the fuel loads. Maybe Red Bull were out to prove a point. Maybe Verstappen was out to prove a point about their performance, but maybe not just Verstappen. Maybe they wanted to say, you lot can all shut up about this technical directive that you're alleging could have had an effect on our Singapore performance. But they can't hide in qualifying. And at least one person yesterday said to me, I said, it doesn't look like the technical directive actually had an effect after all. And he said, well, it depends on whether you think 0.3 quicker than the Ferrari around Suzuka is normal for a Red Bull or not. Maybe it should be more if it wasn't for the technical directive. I don't know. I'm just reporting.
Stirring the pot. 29 minutes remaining of this free practice 3 session. Verstappen is fastest with a 1:39.60, 2/10 clear of Lando Norris. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is third, ahead of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, the top 5. Sergio Perez is 8/10 away from Max Verstappen. He's down in 6th, ahead of Piastri, Sainz, Magnussen and Albon, who rounds out the top 10. Then it's Hülkenberg, Alonso, Ocon, Sargent, Zhou Guanyu, the top 15. Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, Liam Lawson and Lance Stroll, who is out there putting in the laps on the hard compound of tyre, but he is currently down in 20th and last, 2 seconds off the pace. But the sunshine has well and truly come out. The weather has been glorious. There's been a bit of a patter of rain. We got a little bit drenched yesterday while waiting to get our many different trains that we had all managed to just about book on. Other than that, the humidity for today has slightly gone away as well. Right now, air temperature 28.5 degrees. Track temperature, though, 46.5 degrees. And the humidity is around 46%. As it's a real mixture, really, of who's in the pits and who's not. Just seeing Aston Martin out the corner of my eye come in and stop, and then outside of its garage, and then make its way back towards the end of the pit lane. Max Verstappen now back out on track and coming across the line. But, Sam, this gap between Verstappen and Sergio Perez worrisome for the Mexican.
Yeah, it's concerning. But at the same time, none of us like it. But Red Bull...
What are you about to say? None of us like it.
No, but Red Bull don't seem particularly bothered. Maybe they are in-house, but he is second in the World Championship. He's doing what he needs to do in order for them to ultimately achieve the goal that they want to, which is win the constructors and the drivers. So therefore, do they need somebody that's going to really challenge their lead driver Max? Well, why upset the apple cart? Why upset Max?
It's fine this year when they've got such an advantage and there's really no competition for the lead driver. But if it was a year like 2021, for example,
yes, I agree.
Other teams in it, then Perez's performances this year would not have been acceptable.
No.
It would have been, I think,
the moment
fired.
McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes are all closer, then it becomes a worry.
Well, in the constructors, which Red Bull can clinch this weekend, they need to basically lead this weekend with 309 points. They need to score a point more than Mercedes and not be outscored 24 points by Ferrari, but they have a 597 point haul at the top in front of Mercedes with 289. Ferrari in third, just 24 points behind Mercedes as well. So it's tight between second place for sure. And then in the drivers' standings, while Max Verstappen with 374 points, that's 151 more than Sergio Perez, who is second with 223. He has a 43-point buffer to Lewis Hamilton, and he has just come across the line, Sam. You're shaking your head at Perez.
No, it just looked really a mistake going into the final chicane. Just coming off the brake, I don't know whether he's worried that he's going to have a snatch the front brakes, but by doing that, he's run super deep in the first part of the chicane, which then leaves him no room to negotiate the second phase of the chicane, and then you've got a poor exit. So overall, it wasn't a well-negotiated corner. You're
the boss at Red Bull.
Am I?
How are you managing this situation? No, you're definitely not. Don't tell McLaren that. But in a make-believe world, you're in charge of who's in Red Bull and AlphaTauri seats from 2024 beyond. Where are you placing their drivers?
Oh, God. This is. So obviously you've got Max Verstappen as the lead driver. I would then give Liam Lawson a chance in the second Red Bull.
Really?
Why not?
Well, half a rookie.
Why not?
In a Red Bull.
Why not? Why not give him a chance? I would then have maybe you. I don't know what you do at AlphaTauri. I really don't know, because then where does Sergio Perez go? Does he not fit in anywhere at Red Bull anymore? I really don't know. Or do you give him a seat at AlphaTauri? That's why I'm not the boss. I confirm I'm not the boss.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
That's the voice of the McLaren Formula E driver, Sam Bird, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. The BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson is also here, and Rosanna Tennant is down in the pit lane. I hear you're calling the shots at Williams now, Rosanna.
Oh my goodness, no, I'll let James Vowles have that. He's new in the job. Let him give a bit of time to stretch his legs, and then if they need me, they'll call, I know. You might have been wondering why Williams went out so late in the session. And actually it was Team Principal James Vowles saying it's because the track is ramping up at the end, and also there was some heavy rain overnight here in Suzuka, so they wanted to understand the track conditions just to see how the balance was, and they were waiting for the track to improve. So all under control at Williams. And actually we were talking about Logan Sargent's future yesterday during the practice sessions, and Sam, you went what we thought might be bold, saying that Logan Sargent surely will be nailed on for 2024 at Williams because the team believe that he hasn't been given the same chance as Alex Albon this year. And actually James Vowles has kind of confirmed that, saying that yes, Alex Albon has had the new upgrades ahead of Sargent at nearly every race this season, and he said that explains some of the difference between the two teammates, and that's because they often can only get one set of parts made in time, and they have to obviously benchmark that against the older spec units by running the old ones on Logan's car. So obviously Logan helping the team massively then, working out whether upgrades they're bringing are working, but Alex therefore having an advantage each time. So maybe that is why Alex has been doing much better. Maybe Logan will, when given the chance, perform at the same level, but that's a big if, I think, in my eyes.
Sam, you're the boss of Williams.
So it's almost like I know what I'm talking about when I tell you these things. Then I'm telling you good information, guys. You need to listen to me more.
Sorry, what was that? Sorry, terrible. It's almost as bad as Rosanna's Airbnb joke yesterday about buzzing corner on the inside of turns 1 and 2 here in Suzuka, the Sebastian Vettel's biodiversity project, basically housing an insect hotel there. They've got all the drivers down there and having a bit of fun painting that and trying to encourage more biodiversity here in Japan.
So on the Williams second driver front, in Zandvoort, James Vowles said in the press conference that Lawson, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said to keep his job, he needs to show improvement. He's had flashes of speed and ability, but he hasn't been able to put it together, and he needs to show progress through the rest of the season. The problem is he hasn't been showing that progress. And I think Vowles did an interview with Sky yesterday where he, on his own, brought up Liam Lawson and what a good job he'd been doing, and how impressive he'd been in his 4 races with AlphaTauri. And so you have to ask the question: has Sargent done enough yet? There's still quite a lot of races of this season to go, so I don't think it's over for Logan Sargent by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if he wants to be sure of keeping that seat, he must show that improvement that Vowles has been asking for. Basically what he wants is to be consistently closer to Albon, and he has not managed to do that since Val said it in Zandvoort.
I think the hope was that in the Europe, when we got to the European leg of the season for Logan Sargeant, he might be able to have get back on more of an even keel, or at least show that progress, because of course those were tracks that he would know from Formula 2 and Formula 3. But we've now had the European season, we now are in the flyaways. The next track he'll know will be Abu Dhabi, the finale, and that's too late to show a level of improvement.
Very difficult sometimes being the number 2, especially in Formula 1 when upgrades are coming thick and fast. Now I'm not backing Logan Sargeant all the time here, but I have to say, when these updates, critical updates, are going onto the other car, they make such a difference. They make such a big difference in terms of lap time. I remember testing a long time ago now at Manicourt in the Mercedes, and just little aero updates were making 3-4 tenths of a second a lap, and then you'd back to back it AB throughout the day, and there's nothing you can do. If you were on the older spec, you'd be driving just as well, but you're 3-4 tenths off every single lap compared to the new update. So if that's the case for Logan Sargeant, he might be driving just as well. He simply, with that car, can't do the same lap time, and then the press get on his back and say that he's not as quick. Well, it's very difficult to say that that's fully the case. However, you do have somebody in Liam Lawson who is really delivering, so he does need to somehow up his game in a Williams that is not the same as his teammate. He does need to bring out a couple of big performances, I think, just to guarantee he keeps that seat.
Yeah, and look, it's tough being a rookie, especially, as you say, when you're the second driver in a team that does, James Vowles saying when he arrived at Williams in their Grove base, some things are 20 years out of date. So that is always going to be a struggle. The best position has been 11th in a Grand Prix in Austria. Best qualifying was when he got into the top 10 in Zandvoort. So there are flashes, and there was a flash right at the start of the year. I remember Bahrain, he was getting his elbows out. Saudi Arabia, he almost had a brilliant qualifying, but right on his final lap, he ran all 4 wheels across the white line that split the pit lane entry and the track, and that was all agreed at the start of the weekend. If anybody does that, it's lap time's deleted. And that was a bit of a rookie error from Logan Sargeant, but it was only his second race. But that would have been a fantastic achievement to have gotten in that early part of the season. But they haven't confirmed anything yet, have Williams, and that is now really the last seat that is on shaky ground for the time being. So we'll keep you up to date with that, but those are the rumblings that's going on at the moment. About 17.5 minutes left of free practice 3, the last practice session before we get into qualifying a little later on today. And Oscar Piastri has just gone fastest on the soft compounder tyre. He's stuck on a new set, and he's gone fastest with a 1:35.55, 4 tenths clear of Max Verstappen's time. Norris is third and is on a fast lap now, just coming out of sector 1. Then Leclerc, Hamilton the top 5, Russell, Perez, Magnussen, Sainz and Albon the top 10, Hulkenberg, Alonso, Ocon, Sargeant and Zhou Guanyu the top 15, Bottas, Tsunoda, Gasly, Lawson and Lance Stroll 20th and last in his Aston Martin. So he came right out on the hard tyre, didn't he, right at the start of the season. So I think he's running a little bit out of sync in terms of what his practice strategy is, but he is out there on some fresh soft compound tyres, so we'll see what he's got. His middle sector isn't looking too brilliant for the time being, but we'll see where he comes out. But Lando Norris, though, is on the approach down the back straight towards the fast left-hander of 130 are flat out now, not even really a corner in these Formula 1 cars before he gets into the braking zone of the Casio Triangle. That's turns 16, 17 and 18, which brings you back round onto the start-finish straight. The rear wing slot opens for DRS and then slams shut, and he goes fastest with a 1:35.07, half a tenth between himself and Piastri.
Yeah, the last chicane was a little bit scrappy. I felt like he had a little bit too much overall movement in the car. Looked like the tyres were definitely struggling and overheating in that final chicane. Too much of a slide going into an oversteer in the first phase when he turned right, not leaving himself enough room to turn left well. Lack of traction on the exit. You saw that those mini sectors weren't going green or purple in the final sector, whereas everywhere else in the lap they were. So I think there's a little bit of learning and understanding for Lando and the McLaren car to do in that last little bit.
Sam, I've got a question for you. I've noticed that quite a few of the drivers are taking a really different line out of the chicane and onto the pit straight than has been typical in Suzuka over the years. Usually they come out of the chicane on the outside, obviously, and then they run quite wide out of the final corner and brush the grass. And if you remember, Robert Kubica had an accident a few years ago in the Williams because he got too close to the grass, and that corner in the past, even though it looks like it should just be an acceleration zone, has actually been more edgy than you would think. But a lot of the drivers this year are coming in narrow, closer to the pit entry area, and Norris just did it on that lap, and he's not the only one I've seen doing it. What do you think's going on there?
It might just simply, Andrew, be a case of the shorter the distance, the less lap time. I mean, if you make
why not do it before?
Well, Lando's actually been doing it at 130R. He's using half the road on the exit of 130R in places like that. So if in these areas where you're already flat out, if you can make the track shorter, why wouldn't you? You know, if you can cut the track by 10 metres every lap, that's a couple of tenths gained.
The only time I remember seeing it before this year was one of Sebastian Vettel's pole laps in the Red Bull back in their era of dominance in the early 2010s. I think it might have been 2011 or 2013 he did it. And so I wonder whether it's a function of downforce. Maybe they've just got so much downforce on now they don't have to run wide through that final corner, so. And the same in 130R.
I think that would be the case. And yeah, clearly, as I said, if you can cover less ground over a lap while you're flat out, you're going to go faster.
Two Ferraris in the pits at the moment. Rosanna's outside.
Yeah, not up at the top of the timesheets where we saw them yesterday. McLaren leading the way at the moment, but both drivers sitting pretty in the garage. And I was listening in to Charles Leclerc's radio a little earlier on, and he was saying that the clutch felt strange. So I've had a chat with the team. They say, no, not really, all okay. So hopefully everything okay with the number 16 car. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz being told on the radio by his race engineer that he's doing a good job with the tyres. So he will be thrilled to hear that. We know he's often struggled with the tyres in the latter parts of the stints. And of course here we know that the DEG is high, so hopefully that means he might be on top of things when it comes to managing the tyres for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, so well, thanks Rosanna. Work going on down at Ferrari then. And fastest at the moment though are the two McLarens. Lando Norris ahead of Oscar Piastri. Max Verstappen in third. He's still in the pits ahead of Fernando Alonso. Zhou Guanyu has just put in a very good lap time for the Alfa Romeo. Got himself up into the top 5 in front of Leclerc, Bottas, Hamilton, Russell and Perez. The top 10, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Sainz, Sargent and Albon, the top 15, Gasly, Ocon, Tsunoda, Lawson and Stroll, the top 20, as the Alpine currently out on track at the moment. Esteban Ocon making his way around, currently down in 17th, just behind his teammate Pierre Gasly, who had that crash at the end of FP2. Does that dent a confidence for someone like Gasly coming into FP3?
No, he's too experienced now for that to really dent his confidence. If he had another one at the same corner, yes, but you know, it was simply a mistake. He had a small lock-up, and it was a little bit kind of lazy, that shunt, wasn't it? We thought he'd gone in there, gone through the corner, got on the curb, and it had fired him in the wall on the outside, but it was just a lazy lock-up with no grip. No, he won't be lacking confidence.
No, Esteban Ocon has just come across the line, his teammate though, and gone a little bit faster, enough to put himself up into 12th position with a 1:31.924, and he is on some fresh soft tyres. So everybody who's out there at the moment is on some fairly new soft compounder tyres. Leclerc's still in the pits, isn't he? So yeah, that's the wrong number I'm looking at, but everybody else on some fresh rubber. Who is in the pits? It's Piastri, Leclerc, Perez, Hulkenberg, Sainz and Sargent are all the drivers in the pits. Everybody else is out of them as we have an Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu coming into turns 1 and 2. That's maybe just about. Obviously, I know we're watching the TV screens, and I said earlier some team radio.
Just keep an eye on that AlphaTauri in front.
Yes, understood.
He's going way too slow.
And don't stress yourself about it, Max. We will work it out when we get there.
I think that's Max Verstappen talking about Liam Lawson by the looks of things in that AlphaTauri. Or both of them are out there on outlaps on the two AlphaTauris, but Lawson is ahead of Verstappen on the tracker. So just making him his thoughts clear is Max Verstappen. But as the blue skies start to emerge from the quite overcast skies we've had, but the nice white puffy clouds in the mountainous region here in the distance that we can see from our commentary box in this Suzuka International Racing course. We're about 30 miles southwest of Nagoya, 93 miles east of Osaka here in Suzuka. And this is the sound of Max Verstappen, who has gotten through on Liam Lawson and has now got himself a bit of clear track. Zhou Guanyu is also heading around, and to come back to what I was saying, seeing Zhou Guanyu come into turn 1 and 2, I think they're just about, you can sort of see the undulations of this track. It starts to really sort of drop downhill slightly before you then immediately climbing back up through the S's, and there's no room to breathe in this first sector. In fact, around this lap at all.
There's very little time here in Suzuka where the steering wheel is actually straight. You are working from the moment you enter turn 1 pretty much until you exit turn 14. You don't have any kind of breather. You're always working, you're always positioning the car, you're always changing direction. It's a super difficult track at all times, no room for error. That's why all the drivers absolutely love this place.
They do. It really is a driver's favourite, it's a fan favourite, and it's one we all enjoy. My first time coming to Suzuka, and it's a mighty track and a place to get to as well.
It's been a mighty place to get to.
A little bit of a mission. Our journey in this morning, very much, and if you listen to our preview show on the Checkered Flag, it hasn't got any better. And very much in the vein of trains, planes and automobiles. But Max Verstappen then comes across the line and on that soft compounder tyre, he's stuck on a fresh set, and he is fastest once again, a 1:32.67, 2/10 clear from Norris.
Interesting though, Harry, it is only 2/10 from
again.
Norris. And one thing I didn't mention earlier about yesterday was that there's a minimum outlap time that the FIA have defined, and it's to do with safety and not going too slowly. And if you remember, at one point during second practice yesterday, we thought Verstappen had a problem because it came up on the timing screens that he'd stopped. The reason for that was that before his fastest lap, he was 50 seconds too slow on his outlap compared to the FIA's time. Now, in practice that doesn't matter, but you cannot do that in qualifying, obviously. And obviously, what does a slow outlap benefit you? Much cooler tyres before you start the lap. So that could have explained some of his advantage yesterday.
Well, 2/10 is the advantage he has at the moment over Norris and Piastri. Then comes Hamilton, who's 8/10 down in 4th. George Russell, the top 5. Alonso, Zhou, Leclerc, Bottas, Perez, the top 10. Magnussen, Ocon, Hulkenberg, Sainz, and Logan Sargent, the top 15. Albon, Stroll, Gasly, Lawson, and Tsunoda, the top 20 drivers in this pack.
So Mercedes are having a better day today. They're not where they want to be by any stretch of the imagination, but yesterday they did look very weak. In particular, Lewis Hamilton is having a better day because he was outpaced yesterday by George Russell by quite a considerable amount. So hats off to Mercedes for doing the work overnight and getting their car in a better window. But it does seem really hit and miss, doesn't it, on when they find pace. They tend to do it most weekends, but it's like they don't know why, because if they did know why, it would be on the car all the time.
Well, their trackside engineering director, Andrew Shovlin, Sam, who you know well, He was saying yesterday it's a really hard car to put down on track and know it's going to do what you expect it to do from the simulations. So they don't really know why. It's one of the reasons why we assume they're changing their philosophy. I think if they don't change the philosophy next year, Hamilton's going to have something to say about it. Meanwhile, we've got the Ferraris on fast laps at the moment, but they're not looking that great. Carlos Sainz is coming towards the end of the second sector. He's not done any purple mini sectors, some greens. Let's see where he gets to as he comes through 130R through the chicane. Harry, over to you.
Yep, Sainz makes his way through the right-hander, bounces across the first curb, then slings it through the left-hander, once again bounces across the curb in that scarlet red Ferrari. DRS open as he crosses the line, and Carlos Sainz with a 1:31.1, 8/10 off of Max Verstappen, goes fourth fastest. Let's see though what Leclerc can do. He's coming into the final sector now, but he's not had a brilliant sector 3. I wonder if he's actually backed off a little bit. We'll see where Leclerc comes out across the line. No, he did find the time in the end. Only a 10th clear of his teammates. Leclerc in fourth, 1:31.0. Sainz in fifth.
But they're a long way off the McLarens.
Yeah.
He
didn't have a good final sector.
Half a second off the McLarens and Ferraris. Yesterday looked pretty good for them. Perez is just coming towards the end of the lap now as well, which doesn't look too bad. But I think that'll be disappointing for them, even though they didn't expect this to be a great circuit for them. Perez has just gone fourth with that lap, by the way, but he's still 7/10 slower than Verstappen and half a second behind the McLarens, even though he's just managed to sneak ahead of Leclerc.
And that is a huge gap as well. So, team ready for Tsunoda?
Come on, man!
And that's Yuki Tsunoda not happy at all with the Haas of Kevin Magnussen getting rather too close for comfort as they came through turns 1 and 2. Tsunoda on a fast lap, Magnussen slightly dawdling on the racing line, but it's so difficult to get out of the way here, Sam, isn't it? These cars and this track, especially if you catch somebody running up through the S's.
Well, especially
where do you go?
Yeah, exactly. You've either got to kind of stop on the inside in between corners and let the car behind overtake there, or just try and keep it on the outside. But at one point, because there's so many changes of direction, you've got to swap from left to right across the circuit, and if you don't time that well, the car behind can get disturbed there or put off visually. It's very difficult.
Yeah, well, we're also just seeing Tsunoda, though, who was gesticulating madly with his hands at Magnussen. He's coming out through the final corner now. He's on that soft compound tyre. He's currently plumb last, but he comes across the line and he gets his AlphaTauri up into 14th with a 1:31.9, Rosanna.
Yeah, such frustration from Yuki Tsunoda on the radio, and his race engineer had been talking to him just before, saying it was a double cool push. So obviously that will have thrown his rhythm, but this shows us what qualifying could be like later on today. Q1 especially, traffic is going to play havoc and a huge role in where people start for tomorrow's Grand Prix. Are we going to see some big scalps this afternoon, guys?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't see any major surprises. I think the bottom 5 will be filled with AlphaTauris, Alpines, and Aston Martin. And we know which one that will be.
Stroll was on a fast lap, and he got up to 18th with that a little while ago. And now he's just been pushed down to 90th because Lawson's got himself up into 17th. Stroll 1.8 seconds.
Yeah, it's I'm surprised to see Pierre Gasly down there. I don't know whether when they've rebuilt the car after the crash yesterday, that it's not quite to his liking still. So I would expect him to be closer to Esteban Ocon in qualifying. But I don't see any particular big scalps, Rosanna, to be honest. I think that we kind of know the order and it's kind of what we expected. I'm quite happy for Alfa Romeo that they've made a jump forwards, but I don't think that they will
you can never tell with Alfa
be a
Romeo,
surprise. I don't think they're going to be threatening Q3. I think Q3 is full of the normal, the Red Bulls, the McLarens, Ferraris, Mercedes and one Aston Martin.
Well, I think traffic management will certainly prove a factor into getting your fast lap in time during qualifying later on today, which will be certainly one to have a listen into. We are going to be on air for that a little later on. But coming towards the end of the session, and just 50 seconds left of this session actually, so a lot of the cars coming into the pit lane and then going straight towards the end, and having some practice starts on the right-hand side of the pit lane exit. The Alfa Romeo just setting off to do that, and we can head down there before the end of the session and get some news on George Russell. I believe he's in the pits with you, Rosanna.
Yeah, as a lot of the cars are queuing to get out of the pits to do those practice starts. One of the drivers that's not doing that is George Russell, and that's because he has some wheel shield damage on the right rear, and that is repaired, so he's not going to take part in this final bit of FP3. Feels like it's something that would be an easy fix ahead of qualifying, Sam?
I think it's going to be too difficult, no, but time will tell, Rosanna. How many hours have we got until qualifying? I think it's 3 hours. No, 2. Yeah, 3 hours. I did 2.5. I think it's that shouldn't be an issue.
Well, the clock has officially counted down to 0. This is the sound of George Russell's teammate Lewis Hamilton, who is on his final flyer, and he's out there on the soft compound of tyre. He's not finding mega pace on that tyre at the moment. He's currently down in 7th and not finding any time really. So we'll wait and see. Just the final lap's coming, but Verstappen takes the checkered flag, and we'll end this session fastest. Lewis Hamilton, though, comes out of Degner 2. Takes a bit of curb, clouds it. I never know if it's dust he's bringing up now or if it's the underside of the floor catching on that red and white curbing as he makes his way out of the hairpin, being chased down by the Ferrari. It's very close to him. It's Carlos Sainz's Ferrari, which is right up behind Lewis Hamilton as he heads into Spoon Curve with that new chrome helmet. Makes his way round the double left-hander along the back straight towards 130R, and Charles Leclerc, actually, it's behind him, my apologies, is getting a wonderful tow as the McLaren of Oscar Piastri darts out of the way. They both head through the left-hander of 130R. It's fantastic to see the Mercedes and the Ferrari so close together as they come towards the end of their laps in this practice 3 session. So we'll take them to the line round the final corner, and for Lewis Hamilton, who crosses the line, they don't improve, they stay where they are. But they had a little bit of fun, almost race simulation going on there between those two. But at the end of free practice 3, then it's Max Verstappen 2/10 clear from Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Perez is 4th in front of Charles Leclerc, who rounds out the top 5. Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Alonso, Zhou Guanyu rounds out the top 10. Bottas, Magnussen, Ocon, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg the top 15. Sargent, Lawson, Albon, and tough days in the office so far for Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin down in 19th, and Pierre Gasly in the Alpine 20th and last.
Thank you very much, Harry. So that is the final practice session, and it's 3 out of 3 for Max Verstappen, topping all 3 practice sessions. Will he be able to go on and take pole position? It seems likely at this stage, and it seems like the McLaren pairing of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri are the ones vying for the front row as well. Or will Ferrari get in there too? Guys, it's between them now, surely, and Perez there or thereabouts, Harry?
Perez, well, he was 7/10 back from Max Verstappen. He's in the gaggle, but he should be closer to Verstappen.
I think the best that Perez can hope for is a front row start, but that's right now a little bit wishful thinking. I think there's more chance of a Ferrari versus McLaren battle to see who starts 2nd and 3rd on the grid.
And Sam, I'm intrigued. You don't think there are going to be any big scalps this afternoon, but the traffic has proved quite tricky to manage. We're going to need drivers and teams working perfectly together to put them out at the right time so that nobody impedes. And we know what impeding can lead to, or sometimes can't lead to, don't we?
No, you're right, Rosanna. We could see an upset or two. We've also got to factor in the fact that this track is a very tricky track and it's very unforgiving. Drivers are going to be pushing more than they have done at any time this weekend in 2.5 hours time, And could we see a couple of mistakes? Will that throw a couple of red flags out there? We'll find out really soon.
We certainly will, and maybe Mercedes fans will be buoyed by the fact that it was P7 and P8 for George Russell, Lewis Hamilton P7, but a little bit of damage for George Russell, so work to do in the break. But do we feel that they could push even further up, or maybe that is the maximum the car has this weekend?
I think that that's their ceiling moment, to be honest. I can't see them fighting Ferrari, and they're definitely not going to be fighting McLaren or Red Bull.
Yeah, bit of a tricky one for Mercedes. It just doesn't seem to suit them, this track, does it, Harry?
No, I think they have. Today has been a slightly better day for both compared to Friday's running. But when we talk about, well, who's behind Red Bull, I think it's McLaren who has the edge over Ferrari right now. Then comes Mercedes, and I don't discount Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin to cause a bit of trouble as well.
Absolutely. Can't count Fernando out at all. P9 for him today in FP3. Wonder what it'll be in qualifying. Thank you to Andrew Benson, Sam Bird and Harry Benjamin up in the commentary box. I've been Rosanna Tennant. Do join us at 7 o'clock on BBC Sports Extra. This has been an IMG production for Radio 5 Live.